Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this next session. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are all here to speak about clinical trial sites and recruitment during our new COVID-19 environment. I'm happy to have Ms. Karen McIntyre from Scotland. She is actually participating from Scotland. She told me how great the weather is, and we should all travel down there, or travel, depending where you are, travel and go visit her. And I told her to put me on the list. So I'll be joining soon. Karen has 27 years of experience in clinical research and site management organizations and a variety of positions from site coordinator to senior project director. Karen brings extensive experience in a variety of therapeutic areas, including cardiovascular disease, women's health, neuroscience, and infectious diseases in phase 2 through phase 4 clinical trials. With a special interest in site support, Karen has been involved in the development of site support management tools with the goal to improve quality, transparency, and compliance across investigative sites since 2005. We are so honored to have Karen here today to share her wisdom and knowledge in this area so that we can have this dialogue with our sites, but then also hear the feedback from our patients. So thank you so much, Karen. I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Candice. And I can tell you, I am absolutely thrilled to be here. So if I can just share my slides with you. So just let me know when you can.
We can see your slides.
Okay, fantastic. So over the next 20 minutes, what I would like is to share Syneos Health's COVID-19 Site Pulse Initiative experience. And I would also like to share COVID-19 disruptions and lessons learned that we learned over a series of roundtable discussions with our sites. Beginning with where we were back in March 2020, and like every CRO and sponsor, when we think back to that month, it was really a month of checkbox surveys. We were all feverishly trying to identify sites with capabilities to participate in COVID-19 studies. But the challenge was that the studies had still yet to be designed. The scope was also absolutely huge. We needed to understand our site's capability for vaccine studies, for acute respiratory distress syndrome, for COVID-19 treatments, epidemiology, if they had inpatient or outpatient facilities, critical care facilities. And because we didn't yet know the scope, the investigator surveys that we distributed to thousands of sites was very comprehensive. So I am calling the survey comprehensive. Our sites called it very long. So we absolutely had challenges with the COVID-19 Accelerator proactive site outreach, not just because of the rapid spread of COVID-19 infections and the fluctuation in hotspot areas. So we weren't always sure where to go, but also dynamic changes not only in countries, but regional variances. So our data was quickly out of date, but we were also hearing a very loud and clear message from sites that they were experiencing survey fatigue because they were receiving these similar surveys from all of the CROs, from all of the sponsors. And they were receiving these large surveys at a time when resource was limited. Local restrictions had resulted in the closure of some sites. There was reduced capacity for a variety of reasons: self-isolation, furlough, childcare arrangements, caring for elderly relatives. And at that time, the sites were also working through significant changes in their usual practice, and that was just to keep their clinical trial participants and site staff safe. So in this changing, shifting landscape, data was out of date very quickly. At the same time, sites were asking us to please stop sending questionnaires. There was little appetite for repeat surveys. So we needed to find another way. We did need to ensure that we had an understanding of the COVID-19 situation. We did need to have our finger on the pulse for sites and understand their challenges. We needed to enable some kind of frequent communication with a subset of sites that were representative, as closely as possible, of the region and the therapeutic focus areas, to allow us to capture frequent data that we could share internally and with external stakeholders. And we also wanted to be in a position to apply efficiencies to allow us to accelerate study startup where possible. So we had a plan, and the plan was to identify a number of sites across the USA and the top 5 European hotspots. So we were looking at the United Kingdom, Spain, Italy, France, and Germany, and they were really governed with the site ID report from the Johns Hopkins data. We have currently approximately 60 sites on the COVID-19 Site Pulse initiative. And what we are looking to do, or what we needed to do, was to develop a dynamic Site Pulse report so we could communicate this information efficiently. We also knew that the challenges and solutions, the situation really varied significantly depending on the type of site. So it was important to include different types of sites. So we included hospital settings, both academic and community, both sharing different experiences and challenges. We included dedicated research sites and both government-owned and private sites. What we were asking was that a site relationship lead would be assigned to the site, and we made contact initially by email and asked the site that we could contact them 3 to 4 times monthly at a pre-arranged time. To ensure this communication was effectively communicated, a dashboard was created, and that provided dynamic weekly reports. So that allowed us to know where to map studies to the right countries, to the right sites, to the right regions. And also number 4 was we really wanted to help prepare sites to accelerate study startup. So I just want to give you a little demonstration of what the dashboard looked like. We tracked, of course, the countries, and on a weekly basis, we tracked the number of responses from all of the sites in the Site Pulse initiative. We also monitored how many sites had COVID-19 patients and the number of sites that were already participating in COVID-19 studies. We gathered more information, what type of studies these sites were participating in. Were they vaccine studies, were they critical care studies? And we really wanted to make sure that we weren't overloading, or the sites weren't reaching saturation. We also collected COVID patient load by region and country, and availability of PPE and testing kits. And we also monitored lockdown restrictions by country as well, which became very useful, especially when we began to see surges and the lockdown restrictions were much more regional rather than by country. We also collected restart strategy. And again, this was very, very important because that allowed us to share restart strategy across sites. So we could share best practice, we could share what was tried and tested and didn't work so well, and what did work well. We also reported where we had master confidentiality agreements by site, and that was important because that would help if we had permission for those sites to perform outreach feasibility. We also collected and reported master CTAs by country, and where we had privacy consent, we collected non-study specific essential documents. So they would include things like site staff CVs, medical license, GCP certificates. And again, the purpose of that was to help expedite study startup to improve the timelines for these important studies. We recorded and reported IRB turnaround timelines, and I have to say it was fascinating to see this change over time as the volume of COVID-19 studies grew. We collected potential COVID-19 patients by site and also estimated COVID patients by country. And again, critically important, we collected site type by country. So we knew if it was an academic hospital, a vaccine network, a dedicated research site. Just needed to know what their capabilities were when we were mapping studies to those sites. So you can imagine this all fell in place in March, and 5 months or so later, the sites are very gently asking us that we review the frequency. And in some ways, that's a good thing, because the situation has almost plateaued. So we're not seeing this same dynamic, fast changing landscape that we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. So typically we're contacting these sites once a month. We do think it's absolutely critical that we do keep our finger on the pulse. And we also add new sites where we see a surge. So for example, in the UK, in the town of Leicester, in the US, surges in Texas, then we do add new sites where relevant. But you can also imagine and understand that over the last 6 months, we've learned a great deal from our sites through Site Pulse, but not just the Site Pulse initiative, also through the relationship calls that we have with sites on a regular basis. And we wanted to share the lessons learned within our network of sites. So we invited our site staff from our Catalyst network to join in roundtable discussions. We were really asking that they shared lessons from this global pandemic, and we wanted to learn as a CRO what we can do to support sites now and through future medical emergencies. Catalyst is Syneos Health's elite site network. So we invited all of the site staff to a series of webinars. The networks are aligned to Syneos Health's therapeutic business units. So we invited each network separately. We invited CNS separately from oncology, separately from ophthalmology. And the reason for that was we recognised that their challenges and solutions were quite different. They were very well attended. And what we learned was that the challenges and solutions across sites were just not universal. The experience and the restrictions varies considerably depending on the type of site, depending on not only the country, but the region, and especially by the specialised area of research expertise. So an example of that would be some regions in the US where local government considered all research was essential, allowed these sites to remain open, but some only considered COVID-19 essential. One of our post-operative pain sites told us that their site's not purely research driven, but the government in their region eliminated all elective surgeries, so they couldn't continue to perform research at site. The great news is that they're back on track and the site's now open again. But it wasn't the same experience across sites by any means. The same was true of site disruption, again, not universal. We had some, particularly in hospitals, research teams were redeployed back to full clinical care. Some regions, some institutions prioritised what research could and could not be performed. There was, of course, huge variations in lockdown restrictions according to COVID-19 load, and PPE and test kit availability also varied. But I can tell you that a huge message from sites is the sponsors were so proactive supporting PPE, and that was absolutely invaluable to them during the restart strategy. Financial instability was a huge concern for sites. We know through the SCRS annual reports that approximately 60% of our sites have cash flow of 3 months or less. We had a great response from our sponsors participating in initiatives such as early release of holdback payments, reimbursement of exceptional payments, which is payments towards PPE, screening, testing, etc. Payments towards partial payments for visits that couldn't be fully completed due to the pandemic, and also payments to help support patient transfers from the initial study site to another site due to the COVID-19 disruption. We also learned that sites are proactively exploring new technology. They want to be positioned to manage the safety of their clinical trial participants remotely. So we invited all of our Catalyst sites to a decentralised education webinar where they heard about technologies that are available, site-specific technologies that are currently available in the industry. The message that they're telling us to share is that they want to be included when CROs and sponsors are exploring site-specific methodologies, and to do that either through outreach or advocacy groups. They tell us that sometimes there's some assumptions being made that participants will use or can use certain technology when they can't. So they're really looking to be involved in that process. Perhaps we should have expected it, but we're also hearing from sites that there's a significant interest from patients asking about clinical trials and ways that they can participate. Interest is at the moment mainly COVID-19, but a definite increase in patients approaching site staff. We have heard some great stories about sites and networks sharing best practices, fantastic collaborations, creating SOPs for remote monitoring, creating guidance documents on the conduct of remote patient visits, sending out communications to participants so they know exactly what to expect when they arrive at sites, and creating flexible visit scheduling to support clinical trial participants through this unsettled time. We also hear the emotional impact of COVID disruption that has had to the site staff and to patients. Patients who are now receiving treatment without the companionship of family and friends, or that human interaction that we have all grown to take for granted with the reaction with medical staff, holding a hand, giving and receiving a smile. And that is something that we may never take for granted again. But I do want to leave with an innovative approach that I heard from a CNS psychiatry site that shared that in order to visit patients in their clinical trial who had severe schizophrenia, they purchased a van. I think actually it was an ambulance, and they repurposed it to create a socially distancing consulting facility where they could take it to the patient's home and continue with study visits face to face. So the collaboration and creativity across sites has just been awe-inspiring. And I just really want to take this opportunity to tip my hat for all that they do every day, especially through these difficult and unsettling times. I think we still need to keep our finger on the pulse for some months to come. And really, that is all I have to say, but delighted for any comments, questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was a very insightful presentation. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time, but I highly suggest that you instant message or send a direct message, I should say, to Karen and ask your questions. I saw a couple of questions in our chat box, so I hope the dialogue will continue offline. So please feel free to reach out to Karen. I did share this information with her previously, so she's available and open to these any questions you may have. So thank you, Karen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'd like to ask you to join our next session from Society of Clinical Research Sites. That'll be given by Anna Marquez. Thank you so much again, Karen. And don't forget, please feel free to send her a message directly to her so that she can answer any questions you may have. Bye.
Thank you.